We've heard a good deal about the pace of innovation in the Middle East today. It's fitting then that we close today's program with a discussion about that sector. As countries look to put the pandemic behind them, what are the bright spots? What are the not so bright spots? Will this period bring on a new generation of youth innovators? Let's find out and talk to them. Joining us now are Mohamed Al-Neyadi, a student from the UAE attending Wesleyan University. I'm jealous. Gabriella Thomas, an international relations student at the University of Pennsylvania, and Nour Hussein, the chief growth officer. I want to say Tarjama. Am I getting that right, Nour? Tarjama.
Yeah, you got
Sometimes
that right.
It's Tarjama, sometimes it's Tarjama. It's Tarjama, an online translation service powered by AI, and he also advises startups and supports mentorship programs for youth and students. I really appreciate all of you joining us. Nour, let me ask you. I'm sure you know my friend Christopher Schroeder, and you know his world. I mean, everybody I know who's a fun, cool, successful entrepreneur tends to. How did you get your start? What were the vital pieces of it as a young man coming into the scene? What do you wish had been easier? What was unexpected for you?
Thank you, Steve. For me, I think it was a mix of diverse experiences. I was fortunate enough to be able to connect and engage with a lot of bright minds, and actually fortunate enough to get experiences internationally. So starting my career, was able to connect with different professionals, travel the world, work in different organizations and entities across Europe, London, India, UAE, and Egypt as well. And I think one of the things that I feel quite envious about for some of the current generations right now is the accessibility of information. Everything right now is available for anyone who really wants to seek the information there. We're seeing this right now with the trend, obviously, of a lot of the younger generations now are questioning higher education. They're questioning whether there is a real value in pursuing a career or a course when every piece of information that I could potentially need is available for me online. One of the other areas that was definitely not there was the traditional model versus the new, open market. So a lot of my generations was looking into the traditional work model of graduating, getting a degree, joining a professional organization, learning, growing, and taking the career from there onwards. Whereas right now in the region, one of the things that you could really clearly see is the shift from what you could call the shift from the American dream into the startup dream. So no one wants to potentially leave as much, at least the highly skilled workers now. They don't have any problem in staying within the region because they feel that I can access a lot of the information, and if I'm able to pursue my own startup and set up my own business, then I'll be able to live that entrepreneurial dream and be a success story like the examples that you mentioned earlier in the region.
Well, let's jump to Mohamed and to Gabriella. You're both students now. You're active now, Gabriella and Mohamed. I don't know what life choices you're about to make, but again, part of us, the reason that I brought students from different parts of the world is if you kind of overlap many of the way they filter, the way they see things, what their frustrations are, what their opportunities are. There's a lot that's similar. And I'm just interested, you've probably been listening to this conversation a little bit, Gabriella. What are some of the opportunities that you see out there for a young American student over here? And what are you seeing as different or similar with some of the international students, and particularly Middle East students that you're dealing with up in Philly? I assume you're in Philadelphia, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me, Steve.
Yeah.
And I think that there's obviously a very big difference between the opportunities that both groups of students have. I mean, the biggest thing that I can think of is having a U.S. citizenship opens up your opportunities to be able to work so much more. Many of my friends who are from the Middle East or from different areas of the world don't have that privilege, which makes it more difficult for them to find employment. But on the other hand, I think that as far as innovation and access to technology goes, many of my friends, no matter where they're from, are very tech savvy and very driven. And I think that is something that unites students from all over the world, especially this generation. I think technology has just been a constant presence in our lives, and it's something that a lot of young people are using to innovate and bring new ideas to the table.
I know you've lived in Dublin and Ireland and South India. You lived in a lot of places, and I'm going to ask Mohamed this as well. But I do know, because I know people in the American school system, with international students, that international students are in incredible duress right now, that it's a stressful time. Maybe they're overseas. We went through visa drama in this country on whether their visas would continue or not if they couldn't actually physically be in classes. That looks like it's resolved. But are you staying in touch with your international friends, even if they're not, next door in the dorm?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that is another huge benefit of all the technology that we have at our hands. We're able to stay in contact, and in class, we're able to see each other. So that's been a really huge benefit.
Mohamed, I know that you have studied, you're like working on AI data. You're the smartest dude probably on the show today. So how are you, and probably you'll be the most successful, with all that stuff you're doing. But I'm interested as you look at this, and are you at Wesleyan now, or are you in the UAE now?
I'm in Wesleyan right now.
So how has this COVID era been for you? How do you look at the choices, both the good and the bad, that you have in front of you?
I think one of the main things I would say that young Arabs, I think they're realizing that jobs are no longer steady. And I think this is due to the impact of COVID-19. They've seen that the myth, I think that jobs, they realized that job security is actually a thing of the past. And they started to explore more options, including, I think, entrepreneurship. And this is, I think, one of the reasons that explain the rise of entrepreneurship in the region. Also, I think digitization helps young people to, start businesses in terms of lowering the cost and making communication easier, which I think enables them to access more markets. And I think this takes us to globalization. Which I think one of the main drivers of a global economic growth. And I would say that this, as been mentioned in the panel before, these effects may not be clear in the short term, but definitely I think we were gonna see them in the long term, and we'll realize how this pandemic have actually shifted the way our economy works and the way that opportunities actually exist.
Mohamed, thank you. I want to jump to all of you in a minute. We're always short on time on these shows, unfortunately, but get all of you. One of the things I had a privilege to do earlier this year was to moderate a conversation. We had a woman named Ellen Stofan. She's the former chief scientist of NASA, now heads the National Air and Space Museum. And I had Yusuf Otaiba, who's helped support today's program. And we talked about the probe that the UAE launched out of Japan on a Japanese rocket to go to Mars. UAE has also had an astronaut. And, one of the biases that I bring is I'm not used to small Middle Eastern countries shooting things off to Mars or saying we're going to go to the moon. And maybe that's going to become the way of the world for everyone. But what does that do to young people in the Middle East? Is that something that says, wow, with math, with AI, with advancement, with modern investment, we can do just about anything anyone else can do? Or do you find that to be irrelevant to the aspirations of young people? Let me leave that door open too. But let me just ask you, Mohamed, first. I want to ask Gabriella and Nour as well.
Yeah, I think the Mars probe has been, I think, one of the inspirations for young Arab people. I think it represents it gives an example for other countries, and I think also individuals that we as young Arabs, we can explore areas that haven't been explored by us before, and we can have an impact on these issues such as Mars. And I think also, as you mentioned, AI and these things. These things are the future, and I think. I hope that the Mars probe and that was launched by the UAE would make at least give an impact, a positive impact on Arab people to explore other areas and to not limit ourselves to the traditional jobs or the traditional sectors of the economy.
Well, thank you, Gabriella. What kinds of things, from your perspective? I mean, you're in this country, and this is. My view is we're sort of a mess right now, but there are optimistic things. We are achieving great things in some ways. But as you kind of look at it as a student, look from your eyes about what's out there. What lifts people up? What lifts the system up? What do you think? Basically, tell us what we're getting wrong so that we can lift people up.
I think that there are a lot of things that give students hope, and just young people in general, or all people in general. I think just seeing our country make progress in very small ways is something that's always inspiring to young people. So whether that's through social change or economic or scientific innovation, I think that always gives people hope. I think that we need to recognize, though, that progress doesn't stop once you reach a goal. You need to continue, and you need to continue finding new ideas and finding new ways to innovate and make people's lives better.
Oh, thank you. Nour, I'm going to give the last word to you. As someone out there, who's been an entrepreneur and doing this, and I guess I'm always interested kind of in a journalist of what needs to be addressed, what's wobbly, what's shaky, particularly in the Middle East, that I think has been hit by a lot of, it's a mix of good and bad. If you were to look at this BCW study, and if you're in Lebanon, Lebanon does not look like a very stable place through the eyes of young people. There's a lot of frustration. You kind of look at other places in the region. And, I'd just love to get your take as someone who's operating in a successful way there. What do you think needs to be shored up for your many friends, your future friends in this venture and entrepreneurial world that we need to hear?
Well, Steve, one of the things that we see in the region is that the individual adoption of technology among youth is fairly high. However, that's not necessarily always reflected in businesses, governments, and other organizations. So it's very common to find a young person who is using the latest, model of technology, cell phones, apps, etc., but they're not necessarily trained on using the latest technologies in the workplace. Similarly, for a lot of businesses that are initiating and starting or introducing a new idea or a new concept into their market, there may not be necessarily sufficient government regulations to support them with that. One of the challenges that also happens is that the individuals, or a lot of the talented young people, they seek starting a business out of a personal necessity rather than looking at a market need. So a lot of the very talented individuals that feel that they are too skilled or too highly skilled to work in the local or the national economy, and the startup space or the startup scene is relatively limited for them. So they seek starting their own business without an idea validation in there, just out of a personal need or necessity. Now, that doesn't necessarily negate the fact that they might be extremely successful. But on the bright side, one of the things that the region is very fortunate about, particularly as a result of the COVID impact, is we live in a borderless economy right now. So a lot of businesses and a lot of startups are realizing that they're not necessarily restricted to their existing market. We have amazing success stories with companies like Robusta Studios or Instabug that were able to actually penetrate the European market and start offering their services there, which traditionally technology has always been imported from the Middle East, from Europe or from the US into the Middle East. Whereas right now they're realizing we've got the language capability, we've got the technology and the infrastructure, and there's no restriction to us being able to break that glass ceiling and be able to offer our services there. And on the other side there, for years and years, a lot of businesses have found it quite difficult to penetrate the Middle East market due to language barrier, cultural barrier, etc. And that's an opportunity that right now a lot of startups and a lot of businesses are benefiting from in the Middle East. And hopefully that shall continue as more and more startups and more entrepreneurs really push that barrier forward and realize that it is possible for us as Middle Eastern startups to actually export our technology and export our services all over the world.
I really appreciate the conversation and candor of all of you. And I think about if you project ahead and look at what's likely to happen around the world with the development of the global middle class, where's population growing, where are those opportunities. If the equation can get right, if people have opportunity, if young people have confidence and there's support, and you get the right ecosystem, the opportunities in the Middle East, North Africa region are going to be staggeringly great if they can, if it can kind of move across a certain area. And I think that will redound back and benefit in many ways for the United States. And I just really appreciate the candor. And I'll just leave you with one last thought, that I was looking today at something involved another country that we haven't talked about, Japan. The Japanese government is trying to figure out how to be more dynamic, time of COVID, et cetera. And they're trying to get their offices to stop using fax machines. So, it's just an indication of everybody's in a slightly different place. And I think what's fascinating is digital natives, those that are digital and coming into that now, have incredible opportunities in ways that many of us that carry the baggage of previous patterns and habits don't have. So that's my editorial comment for the day. I want to thank you, Gabriella Thomas of the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, who I love, Mohamed Salem Al-Neyadi at the student at Wesleyan University. Thank you so much, or Neyadi, excuse me, and Nour Hussein, Chief Growth and Business Development Officer at Tarjama. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So that brings us to the end of our program today. I want to thank the Embassy of the UAE here in Washington, D.C. for their support of this program, and to all of you for watching with us today. For those of you who missed any of the conversations this afternoon, we're going to have the video up from this event on our website at thehill.com shortly. Go to the events page and you will be able to find it. We'll have a part 3 of this conversation in February. More students, more schools, more experiences, and maybe a couple of members of Congress. We look forward to seeing you then. Thanks very much. I'm Steve Clemens. Be well.